I'll go ahead and get us rolling. And again, the topic of this event is a fireside chat on how to effectively migrate to AWS. As we're going through the presentation, the GoToWebinar interface has a really great capability called questions. And you can go into the GoToWebinar interface and ask questions in the Q&A section, which is super useful. And we will monitor that and do our best to answer those questions as we go. And Francisco's having a little trouble with his audio, so I'm going to encourage him to rejoin. And that's totally fine because his section is a little bit later. And I will get us started. Okay.
And I'm back. I don't know what happened.
He's back. He didn't even have to
audio. Yeah, audio magically started working.
Well, you know, that's the world that we live in these days. Virtual work from home life.
It's funny because we were just talking about it offline.
I know. Well, let's dive into introductions then. Before I introduce myself, I also wanted to mention there are some handouts here in the GoToWebinar interface. You can see under the handouts section, there's an ebook and a data sheet. They're lovely. I highly encourage you to read them after the event. So I shall introduce myself now. My name is Jonathan LaCour. I am the Chief Technology Officer here at Mission, which we'll talk a little bit about Mission in a moment. Some facts and fun things about me. I am a technologist, obviously. I also like to write code and do it a lot more than I probably should. And I'm a strategist and kind of cloud veteran, right? I've been a builder of clouds, a consumer, and now I'm at an organization that's a partner of the dominant cloud platform in the world, AWS. I'm also a bourbon junkie and a foodie in general. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here. And now I'm going to let Francisco introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Francisco Bernal. You might hear Jonathan call me Paco sometimes, which at the end of the day is the same thing. I like fixing things that are broken, especially if it's related to computers. This is funny because I've said this before. I really miss the term sysadmin and just the whole when we did maintain servers and that was our only job and the only thing we need to worry about. I think it was simpler times. Mediocre video player. Even I try to get better and I can't, but I'm very bad at practicing. Been with Evolve for 10 years now, and prior to that worked another 10 years or so in state and federal government here in Mexico. Evolve's technology department is in northern Mexico, and we've worked with them for the past 10 years.
Fantastic. Well, appreciate you being here today. Really excited, Paco, to have you, hear about your experiences. And thanks for letting the audience know that I'm going to call you Paco because they're like, who's this guy? Did Jonathan forget his name? So with that, let's also introduce who Mission is. We are a premier consulting partner for Amazon Web Services and also a managed service provider. So what is it that we do exactly? Well, we always like to describe it across these kind of 4 phases of the cloud journey. Architect, migrate, manage, and optimize. So we're kind of a full service provider. We're 100% focused on AWS, and we can help you with everything from planning out your migrations, which we'll talk about today, providing you with roadmaps, doing POCs and AWS best practices, all the way through the migration and then the management of your environment once you get to the cloud. Including things like DevOps consultation, AI/ML, account management, 24/7 monitoring and support. And finally, once you're in the cloud, it's just the beginning of your journey. And at that point, it's about continuously improving, optimizing, doing cost optimization, and application performance tuning. So Mission is really here to help you across all of those things. And we've also got the credentials that show that we're successful at that. So we're vetted and validated by AWS. That's how we got the Premier Consulting Partner designation. That is the highest tier partner you can be with AWS, and it takes a lot of effort to get it. And still have nightmares. No, I'm sorry. I still have wonderful memories about going through the process. So we're excited to have achieved that. It's a big accomplishment. And we also have what are they called competencies, which AWS provides us kind of more around specific things. So we have the migration competency, which means that they have looked at kind of our case studies, our methodologies, seeing the success that we've had, and validated that we in fact know what we're doing around migrations. We also have competencies in DevOps, Microsoft workloads, SaaS applications, healthcare and life sciences, and some designations as well. We're a managed service provider, a solution provider, program provider, and more. We're also, SOC 2 and ISO 27001, kind of audited, which is another kind of highlight. So let's talk a little bit about Evolve. So Paco, give us the highlights.
Yeah. So Evolve's been around for 22 years now. We are an online publisher. Basically, we have our own and operated sites, which we maintain. We do the code. We have the editors. We do all the work to draw traffic towards them, and basically we sell advertising and big campaigns on the sites. We also we run a couple of our own technologies. We have a video platform, we have an ad serving platform, and we run everything on this customized WordPress. We use WordPress core, but we do a lot of customization around it. Evolves in 5 different countries. Headquarters in US, we have offices in Canada, in the UK, in Australia, and the Mexico office where tech is working up from.
Fantastic. Well, Paco, it's you can see quite a lot of success here, and you've been there for a lot of that journey for 10+ years, which is, I think, rare for technologists to be embedded in organizations throughout that kind of growth phase. So it's your experiences will be very great to hear about. So let's go ahead and set the scene as you decided to migrate to AWS. So tell us a little bit about kind of your key objectives and what the kind of evolution was for you.
So it all started. I think we can think about the migration as 2 phases, or being driven by 2 different times for Evolve. One is we knew we always wanted to. We had been dragging this very old infrastructure of virtual machines and sort of trying to automate a very old hypervisor that we use. And this is back to even before I started with Evolve. We had our own hardware. We had a co-location. We managed everything from switches to firewall. We had CMs, and we had people working networking. We did the whole show. And it came a time when we knew we weren't able to keep up with that. I'm going to mention this a couple of times on this call. We had to accept something that's very hard for people that work in tech. We were not a technology company. It wasn't our core business to have all of the hardware and maintain everything and do firmware upgrades and drive it to the cage and do memory upgrades. I mean, it's fun and we love to do that. But our core business is publishing. Our core business are the sites, and that's what we had to start thinking about. So that was our initial move, or that was the first thing that pushed us to start looking into moving into the cloud. It took us a while because we had a couple of unfortunate events happen, which made us forced us to migrate. But because of the time frames, we always ended up just forklifting the same infrastructure, the same technology we wanted to move off of. and we were still maintaining hypervisors, VMs, and we were doing everything ourselves. But we knew we had to stop because we couldn't keep up. We couldn't have the huge IT department that we had to be able to manage all of this. So that's when we started to think of, we have to right size, not think about it as downsizing the company or the tech department. We just had to right size it again to our core business, which was the product and not the how we ran the product.
Right.
At some point, this after 3 migrations from different service providers, we ended up in a very tight situation where we had 4 months to move off of the current or where we were running everything, and we just knew that if we didn't do that move at that moment, we would just drag this another 5 years.
Right.
So this is what basically made us start talking to people and seeing where we were going to move once the contract we were being pushed off of ended.
Yeah, that's actually a common driver we hear a lot is people are like, well, we have some forcing function, right? Whether it's our colo shutting down or it's a hardware refresh cycle. People often forget hardware refresh cycles are extremely expensive. You're making this massive, CapEx investment up front, and then you're having to kind of amortize that over years to really make it work out. And that's one of the great benefits is kind of getting out of that situation. And to speak to your other one, right? You talked a lot about, recognizing kind of your core competencies as Evolve Media, right? And being a publishing company. And yes, leveraging technology to do that, but, managing a data center, managing hardware, AWS calls this undifferentiated heavy lifting, meaning, it's not differentiating you from your competitors, right? It's just something that needs to get done. And by you doing it, you have to really recognize, is this something that I'm excellent at, or is AWS better? And I got to tell you what, AWS is doing this at a scale never seen before, and I think that was a very wise decision. And I can also see here you have some other kind of objectives you had around 50 applications, and you've got you want to move to a microservices architecture and infrastructure. And containerize everything, right? You didn't have everything containerized. It was a little bit more traditional before, and taking advantage of all AWS's on-demand features as well.
Yeah, this is part of the whole leaving everything that we used to run on behind, because look, we grew the way we did, and our tech stack was the way it was because we had the manpower and we had the hardware, which was ours. So it was very easy for us to just scale up like crazy or have people designated to very particular verticals, and we didn't have to worry because we knew someone was keeping an eye on the database clusters 24/7. And at some point those teams started to reduce. I can tell you that when we started, the whole SICM DBA team was close to 20-25 people. And
Wow.
right now when we did the migration, and now that we've maintained everything in AWS, we're just 3. We were 4. We were a 4-people team, but now we're just 3, and we're maintaining everything that we did when we were the 20-something.
Yeah. Again, undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? Operating and scaling a MySQL server and cluster is a lot of work and a lot of effort. And taking advantage of AWS's managed services, it's a huge driver. And I think this is a good time for us to talk about kind of why people migrate to AWS. So we've heard a little bit about why you did, and I think these things will also resonate with you. But there's a number of reasons that any business might consider a migration to AWS, to the public cloud. And we could spend all day talking about benefits and reasons people might do that, but I want to focus in on 4. And in fact, I'm going to group 2 of these together because I think they're really intertwined. And those are agility and kind of development deployment acceleration. So AWS as a service offers an incredible amount of power, capability, and tools that you can use to scale up and down on demand, elasticity, resiliency, availability zones and regions, and the diverse number of platforms and tools available, all in managed services, which take the undifferentiated heavy lifting off of you and helps you be a little bit more agile, or a lot more agile and resilient in your workload. And that empowers your engineers, your developers, and those teams that we were talking about, Francisco, who really need to focus in on your core competencies and capabilities, allows them to take advantage of all of that power and then be able to really tighten the release cycle, take advantage of CI/CD pipelines, infrastructure as code, and really, make it much faster for you to push things out and release. And in a media company, that's a huge advantage, right? Because you need to be able to keep up and evolve rapidly and reduce time to launch. And then the two other ones to highlight here is first is cost efficiency. A lot of people question the cost of public cloud, and I can understand that, right? I think if you go in without really being well considered, you can certainly spend a lot more on the public cloud than you would if you did it yourself. But that is not the common case that I've seen if you have a good plan, right? Because actually AWS offers you far more levers to push and pull to optimize your cost, and far more visibility and granularity of cost than you can get in a data center, right? You can take advantage of things like tagging. You can take advantage of things like serverless, right? You can use Lambda functions to only pay for exactly what you execute and get a high degree of granularity into which functions are costing you the most and which ones are costing you the less. And you can take advantage of kind of governance programs and tools that will help you kind of enforce everything. Things like RIs and savings plans to kind of make commitments based upon your workload's kind of typical kind of patterns, right? As compared to in a data center where, say, you have to buy the amount of hardware necessary to serve your peak, right? And then it can sit idle most of the time, especially if you're a business that maybe has very seasonal kind of traffic. So all these things come together to be able to provide you with better cost efficiency. A lot of it comes from visibility and all the tools that are provided to you in Power in AWS. And finally, longevity. I think this is really important. If your business is going to be around for a long time, as Evolve has, right, you need to be able to evolve. And you also need to be able to take advantage of new technologies that can really support your evolving needs, scale, and priorities. And AWS has been around since the beginning, really the pioneer and creator of the cloud. And they're releasing hundreds of features a year and dozens of services. And I can tell you, as a CTO at a AWS partner, it can be challenging to keep up, right, with all of the incredible evolution that they're providing. And that's a foundation for you to kind of move forward. So Paco, maybe tell us a little bit about, kind of your reaction to that, and a little bit about, kind of the partner opportunity program that you took advantage of.
Yeah, it's funny because everything you mentioned, I think at some point was a concern for us when we were moving to the cloud. Especially, like I said, we were coming from a place where we had the resources, we had the metal machines, and we had this pool of CPU and RAM memory where if we just needed something, we just create it, and we would just scale up and up and up. And we were not ready to lose that control. So it was like the security blanket that if something is not working, let's just throw some more CPUs to it. It has to work. But we rapidly realized that part of that way of just throwing resources at things is because we were actually not, our underlying infrastructure was not what we needed. We were running on very old hardware, thing that doesn't happen anymore. We've actually seen that we've downsized. Like our initial, we'll talk about it. Our initial downsize was huge, and then we did even more. So
yeah,
it's just the not knowing what you're putting yourself into, and Mission help with all of those questions, because I was very apprehensive about the move. I was really not ready.
Yeah.
During the migration, I'm pretty sure I had a meltdown a week when I thought this is not gonna work. Don't know what's gonna happen. I was envisioning our sites being down and me just like not talking to anyone and just leaving the country or something, because you get into this panic mode of my migrations are hard, and even more if you're making a big shift like we did
Yeah.
to move to the cloud and move to new technologies and not have enough time to test as much as you want, which, let's be honest, there's never enough. You always wanna do another round, and you always want to be sure about something else. um but it was like we had a list of things we knew we needed to take care of. We
Yeah.
needed faster sites, we needed to pay less, and we needed to be able to not worry about things being up. We just needed to worry about the actual product, like I said,
Yeah.
and we accomplished everything with AWS with that extra visibility that you say, um, the reserved instances, the having our monthly call with someone with Mitch, and that we go through all of our billing, and then we figure out how we can even make that better.
Mm.
Um, all of the new products, it's funny how you talk to like the cost specialists, and they'll tell you, you know what, if you upgrade to this new version of the service you're running, it'll actually be less than the
Yeah.
legacy you're running.
Yeah.
which which when you think about owning owning the hardware, like it's the other way around. Like if you upgrade, it'll cost you more because you need to,
Right.
like you said, like you need to buy more servers, you need to buy, and this has been very different for us, and it's been working great.
Yeah. Well, wonderful overview there. And I think one of the things that you talked about there is kind of the nervousness and the fear around a migration, right? And one of the things that I think is really important is having a partner along with you
Yeah.
can really help give you confidence, right? And I do want to later go over in a little bit more detail our methodology, which we've developed over many migrations, and now it makes it much easier for us to do it with confidence and to be very clear with our customers about here's what you can expect, here's the things you need to know, here's our plan of action, we're going to execute it for you, and when you get there, we're going to support you with continuous improvement and optimization, right? And we'll talk more about that in a bit, but this is called a fireside chat for a reason. And so I'm going to put on this lovely little video here. It is a YouTube video, and so you're going to see some ads from our sponsors. I forgot to log in with my YouTube Premium account. And, so look at that. I'm going to go over here and close that. We are not interested in that YouTube. So Francisco, sorry, Paco. We're sitting by the fire here. I'm going to go by the buddy name.
We're missing the bourbon and the bad
I
guitar
know
playing, to be honest.
it's true. It's true. I'm not saying that this is coffee or isn't coffee. Okay, so I've got some questions here. I think you've covered some of them, so I'm going to skip over some of the things that we've already kind of covered, including kind of how long you've been around and your drivers for AWS.
Mhm.
So, did one of the first things to ask here, I think, is one we touched on, you and I before, which is kind of what did you consider when you knew you needed to get out of managing it all yourselves? What were your options? Kind of what attracted you specifically to AWS?
I think when we started this, our former CTO, Veronica Hilton, did a lot of the heavy lifting at the beginning. She
Mm,
was the first point of contact with you guys, and which I eventually took over.
yeah,
But while we started, we spoke to all of the big players, and we all know who they are. But we always knew we wanted to be in AWS. I think everyone has had something running in AWS, either be like an S3 bucket where you throw things at it, or you have that very old legacy system, you just want to be
Right.
online, but you don't want to have in the infrastructure because of old versions and stuff like that. So I think we all know a little bit about AWS, and like you know what you're getting into at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
So
Market leader,
um,
right? Market leader.
yeah, it is what it is, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, they're huge, and like you said, try to keep up with everything they have. If you need something, I'm pretty sure if it's not running, you can find it in a roadmap and it'll be available.
Yeah.
So, and we found every service we needed, it's there. So that's been
Yeah.
very helpful.
Well, speaking of that, tell us a little bit about kind of what are the main services that you do use on AWS.
So like we said, we try to modernize everything as much as we could, but you still have a couple of EC2 instances, right? You have that very old Linux server you want running with the code you don't even want to touch because you know it runs, and when you try to edit, it just doesn't work. So there's things we just didn't want to touch, and they're just running as is. One of the big advantages we saw was running RDS, no pain, basically import our dumps, and things were up and running. Pretty easy to configure settings, upscale. When we have big traffic spikes, it'll auto scale, and we know, like, it's so easy to put limits on. I
Yeah.
know you'll grow, but like if you go 3x times, something's wrong because we're not expecting 3x. So there's a lot of things that without a lot of work, you can get up and running. We use EMR a lot for our analytics for the ad delivery technology we have. EKS for our managed clusters for Kubernetes, where we're running most of our outside facing sites. Elasticache helps us a ton with our forums. EFS, we're very, very dependent on being able to mount info between servers and between uh, like UGCs that'll be needed for different sites or just different tech.
And EFS,
S3,
I'm assuming you're using for, kind of like your WordPress stack, right? It's a
correct,
traditional LAMP application, but you can
correct.
definitely take advantage of things like EFS to allow you to share a volume, right? Share a
Yeah.
file system, and then allow these sort of, I hate to call it a legacy application, but it's been around for a long time. It's not really architected for the cloud,
Mhm.
but you can still take advantage, right? By using services like EFS, you can say, I can scale out now instead of just having to scale up, right? It's a
Correct.
big, big differentiator.
Yeah, and then so easy to back up to S3. So we
Okay.
basically, I know we set it up, we tested it once, we tested a couple of times a month, and then we know it just works for UGCs, for some of our code, and for our database backups. That's
Right.
awesome. And something we always had some issues with, and we go back to the having time to maintain, is email. Just
Mm.
SES has been a lifesaver, not having to deal with, is the MTA working? Did we hit a limit? Are
Yeah, I lost your audio there for a second, but while you're working on that, I'll say definitely chime in. Email and Kubernetes are the two things that I heard really leap out. We already talked about RDS, the win of that undifferentiated heavy lifting. I can tell you right now, I have so many peers out in the world that I speak to who are like, yeah, our organization is running a Kubernetes cluster, and I've been a part of organizations that have done that in the past. And I got to tell you what, running a Kubernetes cluster and managing it is an enormous amount of work. There is an extremely high amount of complexity. Don't get me wrong, I think Kubernetes is fantastic and it can really help you in a lot of ways. But I highly recommend taking advantage of something like EKS, right? Because AWS takes all that work away from you. You can focus on using it and getting the benefits of it. So anytime someone comes to me and is like, I'm thinking about using Kubernetes, that's one of the first things I tell them.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, because I lost you there for a minute again.
No
Something's
worries, no
happening.
worries.
Sorry.
No problem. And the other one you talked about SES, right? SES is another huge undifferentiated heavy lifting. I've been part of organizations that do email at scale with customers, and email is a huge challenge, right? Because there's blacklists,
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of spam to deal with, and like you said, you talked about the MTA and all. There's a lot to manage, a lot to worry about, and it's not just about the technology; it's also about the relationships with a lot of these big providers to make sure that your email is considered legitimate. And AWS takes all of that work away, and you just have an API to send stuff. And it's just like, oh, thank God, right? It's
Yeah.
a huge win.
It's very funny because and this was some of the post migration tasks we had. We knew we had to focus on moving everything, and then we had a list of we need to make deploys, we need to get email working. We had this huge list, which ended up I think being more than the actual migration.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we did try to set up our own MTA the way we used to run it. And like 4 hours into it, I was like, but why am I doing this to myself, right? Turn on SES, and we email was flowing like 30
Check.
minutes into it. Yeah.
Check. Well, good. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad. That's a great overview of the services that you used. So I think kind of the next question that I'd like to talk about is a little bit about kind of why you chose a partner, right? And what was the primary driver to prompt you to say, hey, look, I could really use a partner in this migration?
One was time. We had 4 months to move out, and we were not a big team, so we needed help, we needed manpower, we needed man hours, and we needed the knowledge because we were moving to new technology, and we were moving to a new service, which
Right.
we didn't know a lot about. We could have done it ourselves if we had a year to do it. Of course we would have, but we didn't have we didn't have the time. So
Yeah,
that
time,
was
expertise. Those are good reasons, right? For sure. And ultimately, why Mission? I'm sure you had other partners in the mix. What made you choose us?
we on our initial calls, I think it's a gut feeling, right? It's like it's a gut feeling of yeah, I get what they are talking about. They understand their concerns. They understand the time frame. They're not afraid of it as I am. And honestly, word of mouth. You guys were also recommended by some people that we had already worked with, so that always helps.
Yeah, great. Well, now I know what to dial in on to make sure we keep that good reputation. Yeah, excellent. Well, I think we've already answered some of these other questions, but I think the one big one that I think is important to kind of summarize is you've made the move. You're reaping the benefits. How would you summarize the overall results? How happy are you with the outcome?
For starters, we hit the deadline on the day. So if I recall correctly, and sometimes I don't because I have that blocked in my mind, those 4 months are a total blur. Between the hours we worked, between the pressure, COVID started. So we're used to working remotely given we work with other countries, but being able to sit down in a room and talk about things, and that interaction, that adrenaline of talking to someone, or even like getting into a yelling competition to see who's right, or like that's part of the job. And we had to learn how to work. Now we were actually remote. Everyone was working off of their computer somewhere else. There were a lot of factors that that would have been a very bad migration. But we finished on the day. We actually, so I think we finished noon 3 p.m. on the last day, and like we had all of our checklists of what we had to move ready, and
Yeah.
everything was up and running, and DNS was moved and pointing to Amazon. Everything was up and running. And so we said, we've got a couple of hours. Let's go back and revisit what else we can move. Like we had some old, very old backups
Yeah.
of things that like it was nice to have around. And so we started moving a couple of things. And I think it was around 7 or 8 p.m. our VPN went down and we were locked out. So we didn't even get the whole full day to move out. Uh, that was exciting and that was scary.
Yeah.
But we did it. Um, Initial costs, when I think it was what we expected. We knew we were starting again because we didn't know a lot of running things in AWS.
Yeah.
We scaled up a lot, but we very quickly realized that we would be able to even drop our footprint way down. I think we started at around 20% less in our billing. We're close to 50 now.
Yeah.
And we haven't been really like killing ourselves trying to have stuff work. Everything's up and running, everything's smooth, and we've been able to cut a lot of that cost. And we it was good to have you guys because I think I don't know if we talked about well we did. Uh, we had the pressure of the time frame. We had the pressure of the we were a
Right.
small team, but given the people you gave us to work with, we basically we had 24-hour work being done. We've had our people here. We had in people in France that were helping us with the move, and we're basically working 24 hours a day. So
Yeah.
we can think about we stretched those 4 months to 8 months of work, and everything was great. Everyone was ready. Everyone was there when we needed them. Answered our questions. We did have like we had some scenarios and we had some things happen close to the migration where very unexpected issues
Right.
happened, but they were able to have everything up and running to the day we needed it. So that was very good.
Awesome. Well, good outcome, right? And that's exciting. And I do think we should talk, in a little bit when we get to the methodology about, I think you highlighted that your compelling event was not cost. Your compelling event was not getting to the agility. Your compelling event was, I have 4 months to get out of here. And yes, cost and agility and all of these other longevity, all the other benefits we talked about were interesting to you. But the
Mm-hmm.
entire approach is shaped by your business goals. And I think that's a really big, important key thing about working with a partner is, it's easy to get lost in the shuffle here, right? Because you have all these competing opportunities. And the most important thing for you was, I have 4 months, right? That's
Yeah.
ultimately the number one thing. And then once you were there, it was all about, okay, now let's optimize for all the other benefits. And that's a really good, kind of lead into the next phase of our conversation. So we already did talk about a lot of these questions. And we talked about, kind of accelerating migration, right? That 4-month period, working with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think one thing here is, what about end users to a new computing environment? The question number 2 here.
It was I think for us it was easy. We did have to because of the time. We basically we just moved our sites and just have them working as they were. And then we were able to take our time to start building the rest of our infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Like we took our time to build staging environment from our prod, and we took time to like how do we want to work with deploys now? What do we want to give the dev team to work with? Which which for us in the tech department, we feel we do have two end users on different sides of the actual infrastructure. We have the end user, we have people visiting our sites, but we also have the devs, which we need to give a working platform for them to work on our site. So we had the clients outside ready, and sites were up and sites were fast. So we had time to focus on people inside Evolve and having them have a full set of tools to help them with their day-to-day job.
Excellent. That's a great kind of overview there. And we have some other questions here about kind of application performance and synchronization. I think we talked about a lot of this and about the capabilities that AWS provides for resilience and failover and automated backups and the benefits you talked about as well. But anything to add on these last three questions?
I think everything relating to now we're running on AWS, everything that I've always talked about as post-migration task and post-migration work. It's been great having Mission there because technologists, right? We want to do things ourselves and we don't want to ask for help. But it comes a point where if you need to, we have people to help us. And I think it's so performance, we've had help from Mission. They've helped us with and we're gonna talk about this on the planning. We started thinking about how it's gonna be when it's up and running. What will happen if we have an issue? How will we fail over? How will we work with backups? So all of that was discussed prior to the migration, and then we were helped to set it up once we were moved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the really interesting thing here is you highlighted something that is really important to share, which is, you didn't just come to us and say, I want you to take all this off my hands. You said, I need a partner to work with. That's what partnership is, right? We're working together for your business goals, right? And that's why we're called Mission, right? We want to help you achieve your mission. And I think, there's going to be organizations where they actually do need to offload stuff to us because it's just not their core competency. They need this capability. And there's other organizations that don't need that. Maybe they just need recommendations and advice on what to do. And the critical thing for us as Mission, as a partner, is we know the things that you need to do to be successful in AWS. We know that you need to have, cost optimization and governance practice, FinOps. We know you need to have cloud operations, and you need to have DevOps, and you need to have kind of site reliability. You need all of these things together, right? And if you don't have it, we can help you. If you do have it and you need, expertise, we can help you. And it's not about we want to take it all over. It's about whatever you end up needing, whatever you need complementary help with, that's where we live. That's the world we live in. And I think that's a really cool way to think about it, because it makes sure you can take advantage of your core skill sets and, and augment with us and help up-level your skill sets as well. So really, really good breakdown there. And Paco, I want to, kind of talk a little bit about the methodology that we went through, right? And you talked a lot about sort of the fear of a migration and sort of the nervousness around it. And the key thing is having a playbook, right? And having that experience. And we talked about Mission having the migration competency. And one of the big things about having that competency is really showing a repeatable process and showing success in executing against that process. And our approach has evolved over time, but this is really kind of where we are now. And it's a multi-phase process, and it's actually based upon some of the processes that AWS recommends and some of their programs like the Migration Acceleration Program and their kind of cloud adoption framework. But we kind of start here, and I think one other thing to show about on the slide, there's a lot here, is you can see there's obligations from Mission and there's obligations from the customer, and there are shared responsibilities along the entire phase. What we provide is sort of this unified project management across the whole thing to make sure that we stay on track, that we're going to hit our deadlines, that we know exactly where we're going. And it all starts with this first phase, which is kind of an assessment phase, a readiness assessment. And this is really designed to open your eyes to all of the things you need to know before you make the migration, right? What are the financial impacts, the operational impacts, technology challenges we need to overcome? It's the homework, right, to do before you even make a plan. And some of the key questions we ask are things like, what are your internal skill sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can we augment you? What do we need to do? Do you have the people who can manage the migration, who can operate, once you're in the cloud? Financial planning, licensing implications. This is a huge one. A lot of people who have like Microsoft workloads or using Oracle or things of that nature, they have to consider what the licensing implications are and potentially look at moving off of something like SQL Server, either adopting the RDS version where the licensing is bundled in, or moving to something where there's no licensing cost at all, like an Aurora, right? ER, right? What's your disaster recovery strategy, business continuity, security, patching, backups, all of those processes. And it's just ultimately it's about doing this homework, understanding the readiness of the organization, the workload to make that transition. And after that, we drive into kind of a planning phase, which we call mobilization, right? Plan migration here. And it's about doing technical discovery, okay? And creating a migration plan and what we call landing zone. So a landing zone is sort of the target for the migration, where you will end up landing your workloads inside of AWS. And there's a lot of kind of outer infrastructure that has to be put in place in order to make that work. Part of all that technical diligence and part of that readiness assessment, part of building out the plan, we then know what we need to do. We create kind of the VPCs and set them properly and other networking kind of components. We deploy security and management tools and processes. We configure your automated backups and patch management and monitoring tools and processes. And we also prep the migration tooling and automation, and we do a test migration of kind of a pilot workload. And then we validate that and look at how we can optimize for cost, train the teams on operating the pilot workload, and kind of applying DevOps best practices. And then we finalize that plan based upon that pilot workload. It can be a live workload. It can be a kind of sample kind of staging type workload, but it really informs the rest of the execution. And speaking of which, that's the next phase. And that means we're actually going to move. We're going to repeatably, kind of go through this validated process. And we're going to use the automation, the lessons learned in the mobilize phase, to deploy the remaining applications and workloads on AWS, kind of using that phased approach. And we'll align with whatever your business goals are. So if you're time constrained, you may do lift and shift to start with and work on kind of modernizing later. But if you're not, you're really looking to get to the agility side of things quicker, and you're not so time constrained on the other side of it, we can do kind of transformation before we do the migration, and re-architect, modernize, all that good stuff. And I think the last thing here is obviously the validation phase, where we're going through and making sure that everything's configured the way you like it, everything is ready to go, event incident generation, kind of validation of your traffic, and handover to your operations team or ours, depending on the strategy you have there. But I think the most important thing here is that arrow keeps going off to the right of the screen for a long, long time. Getting to the cloud is only the start, right? Now you have this continuous improvement opportunity, and you mentioned that, right? So, you said Mission has tagged along with you now for continuous improvement, and you've dropped your costs significantly, and you've made improvements, and you've modernized, right? Now you're taking advantage of what's there. So the migration methodology is sort of the hard part in the front, and then you've got the hard part after, which is continued improvement and such.
Yeah, and one thing you touched here that I really want to talk a little bit about is the actual project management from your side. I think that was key to the success of our migration, because at some level we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. Like we didn't, like right now we have a clear idea of how everything runs and how everything ties in together in AWS, but we've been running everything for a little bit over a year now.
Yeah.
But honestly, just having that person in our daily and weekly meetings, just keeping us real on, did you do what you needed to do for the work we need to do tomorrow? That was key, because the other part is, when you're migrating, you might have the luxury of having a team that's working 100% on migration. We were working on the migration while keeping everything up and running as it was.
Right, right.
So you're trying, like, I'm trying to keep the site up and running, and I'm trying to move it. So what do I do first, right? So that helped us a lot, just having someone keep track of what we were doing, just um, see what's missing, see some things falling through the cracks, which it did a lot of times.
Yeah.
But it was a ton of work, so that really helped us at the end.
Great call out, and you're totally right. You know, because people often think about a migration or a movement to the cloud as a largely technical activity, and yeah, there's a lot of technology involved, but honestly, the process is almost more important, right? Having someone track it end to end, and having a PMO with a group of seasoned project managers who have walked through this time and time and time again and have seen it all. It really, really helps, right? Because you want the technologist to be focused on execution, and the project manager can really ensure that all the data that's gathered needs to be gathered. You have everything,
Yep.
managed, all the risks are accounted for, and everyone can just focus on execution while the project manager kind of flies over the top and it's like, okay, we have everything in place. Are we on track? Are we going to hit our schedule, our deadline? And it really is, I'm glad you called that out because it is an extremely important note. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk a little about, kind of the, you already talked about your kind of migration deadline and when we started. And we talked about kind of our key steps, right? Prioritizing your workloads. Which ones do we need to migrate first? Which ones can wait? Which ones do we need to expedite? Getting the landing zone right. That involves a lot of coordination between both of us, right? We have to understand, what are the traffic flows look like? What are your kind of security concerns? Do you have a VPN that you need to have set up? All of that good stuff. And sort of the security groups and all of that, right? Kind of surrounding, kind of where your migration target is going to be. And then, POC for container management. Believe it or not, in this short timeline, we were able to do that, right? Which I think is a fantastic thing. So, maybe dive into that a little bit. I think that would be an interesting thing to hear from you, Paco.
It was a very stressful time. I'm pretty sure anyone who's migrated, even if you don't have a deadline, that DNS switch, like you think everything's gonna work, and then you do the switch and things
hold your breath, right?
Yeah, things just stop working. That's really hard, and I think it was extra hard for us because of what you were talking about, the landing zones, all of the moving parts that we now had in AWS that we've never had before.
Yeah.
That was all of that work that I would say is not technical, because it wasn't us moving or migrating the data and having the service run and having the site run. There's a lot of things in the background that need to work.
Yep.
For this to happen, which is different from setting up a system where I sort of think of it as it's the whole OS installation that we used to do in the old days and be sure that the server is ready. But now it's all of this back infrastructure for AWS and everything, all of the parts that are tied in together for you to be ready to start running your infrastructure in it.
Yeah, for sure.
All of the tests, just having mission test a lot of the things we push, and then being able to help us understand what was going wrong when things went wrong. That was great, because I'm never gonna be tired of saying this. Like, we had no time, so and any help we got was really great.
Yeah, I think another thing you talked about there really is, it really made me think when you're on-prem, and a lot of times if you have like a legacy and all of this, there's a whole lot of infrastructure that I would categorize as pets, right? Where you're taking care of them individually and you're caring and feeding for them. And the cool thing is about when you get to the cloud and we're using tools like infrastructure as code, you know, before your infrastructure was sort of just, you know, lots of tribal knowledge, silos, people all over the place. There was no way to get a full, complete picture, or at least it's very difficult unless you're just an extremely disciplined business who has, you know, documented every single thing. When you're using something like Terraform, which we used in your case, we're building out all of your infrastructure in a codified source control, like version controlled way. And you can see the whole thing. You get the whole picture. This is what my infrastructure looks like. You end up with a platform that is documented, right? And not just documented, it is completely automated. And that is a really huge thing because you turn this sort of like, you know, fraught with legacy and technical debt and trying to figure out where things are. And, you know, you move one thing and something breaks over here into something where you've got, you know, clarity. You've got clarity about your workload. And that clarity is exactly what is used to inform yourself about, and when you're onboarding new team members, this is our infrastructure. Go look at our Terraform templates, right? Go look at how it all fits together, and you get a much clearer picture. And it's documented.
And something great about having Mission there, for example, for the whole Terraform and the creation of the landing zone and being ready to move, we didn't have the mental bandwidth to, okay, let's sit down and plan this, right?
Right.
On the Evolve side, like I feel like, you know, when you're moving, and we were talking about that earlier as well, like when you're moving to a new place, there comes a moment where you start grabbing things and you just throw them out, and you just need them to be out. I'll figure out later if it goes where it's supposed to. I don't care where it ends up. I just need it to be outside of this room.
Right.
That was our mind state, at least for my team, is what haven't we moved out? Like, what database do we need to export and have up and running? Which UGC hasn't synced? How much gigabytes or terabytes are missing? That was our goal. We just needed things to run. And we didn't have the luxury of, let's sit down and let's see how this is going to run. We do it now, right? And when we build stage and dev, we took our time and we were very picky about how we did it. But when we moved to prod, we couldn't do that, and Mission did that for us.
That's a great call out, Paco. And you know, I went here, we're running short on time here, near the end of our time for the conversation, but you know, I do want to highlight some of the results. We talked about, you know, kind of the immediate 20% cost reduction when you made the migration, and you know, pushing now to 50%, and there's probably even more opportunity. Over 50 applications migrated, and you know, really streamline your infrastructure, and you know, gave your devs more time to focus on developing rather than having a burden of operations. And
correct.
We talked about the third-party integrations and tools. We talked about Terraform, WordPress, also Elasticsearch, all the services you used, and what a great success. And I, you know, as much as, you know, I think Mission is excited to have the praise from you on that executing well. It takes two, right? That's why it's a partnership. And Paco, you did a fantastic job as well. I know it was a highly stressful time, but what a good outcome, and not an easy thing to do for either party. But I'm glad we got to take that ride together. And if you're interested, those of you who are watching, are interested in taking that journey with us as well, or considering it, remember our methodology at the beginning talks about a readiness assessment. Well, you know, for those of you who are in attendance, this is sort of a special thing. You can get a free migration readiness assessment from us. And so you can do that at missioncloud.com/free-MRA. You can see that URL on the bottom of the screen. You can also email us or reach out to us. Go to our website, missioncloud.com. We're happy to chat with you about your needs. You can sit down with a solutions architect who can kind of walk through your entire workload with you. If you're already in AWS, we can help you optimize and improve, get you, like Paco, to drop your costs by 50% or more, and to continuously improve. So with that, quick reminder, there's some handouts to download. So I recommend you do that. And Paco, huge pleasure to speak with you again. Always a joy. And congrats on the migration, and looking forward to continuing our partnership.
Yeah, thank you guys. And just a big shout out to my tech ops team, my dev team, everyone that was involved on our side, on mission side. And one of the pluses of moving to AWS with mission has been this talks, and like these events are pretty fun,
Yeah,
and they get the discussion going, and it's always fun to compare scars.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again, and thank you all for attending. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.